go ahead and be a nihilist. The universe is going to end anyway.
Yeah.
We know this. So the whole like somebody giving up and being like, oh, well, it's all bullshit. Okay, you're right. You're actually literally correct. It's actually true.
Yeah.
And your own little drop of water in the ocean, that's your little life. Okay,
Yeah.
I understand you feel bad. I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, go ahead and kill yourself if that's what you actually want.
Yeah.
Because it's too much work. Don't, my advice for somebody not in that state who's gone that far would be don't seek happiness, seek truth.
Yeah.
Like happiness and desire will eventually betray you, whether you get it or you don't.
Very Buddhist.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and that happened to me personally with buying this house.
Yeah.
Because it was this incredibly stressful ordeal.
Yeah.
And it was really down to the wire. And the consequences of not getting the house would have been immediate, catastrophic, and life-changing. Because everything, I would have had to get rid of the goats, sell a lot of my stuff, give up on all these projects like the biochar project and other stuff, and the garden and all the other crap.
Yeah.
And I would have had to do it to somebody who I hated, who was evil.
Yeah.
And I would have had to start over from almost zero.
Yeah.
And then, magically, I signed some papers and the house was mine. And I realized, like, even the dream coming true is also the end of the dream.
Yeah.
Because Mom got sick 2 months after.
Yeah.
So I had no time to relax.
Yeah.
But I went into the empty rooms when the carpet was brand new. Literally nobody had walked on. I just lay in the corner, because I still can't, it hasn't really sunk in that I own this house.
Yeah.
But I think of that in the context of history as well. Like, what would you do, Muggs, if you could go in a time machine and warn the Romans of what was going to happen? And you had a universal translator in your ear, and so you spoke perfect Latin and you could blend in. And you were going to warn the Romans.
Sounds Star Trek-y.
Sure, but what would you do?
Yeah.
Because they fought to maintain what they had.
Yeah.
Very hard, and it didn't work. Would you tell them about gunpowder? Would you tell them about? Would you build steam engines for them, or like the basics of it, and try to get it going? What would you do?
Oh.
Because a lot of people suffered to keep that empire going. Honestly, and in a way on both sides. And a lot of people suffered to inadvertently collapse it.
Yeah.
Would you? Or would you go there and go, there's a rise and fall to these things. Nobody is outside of the flow of history.
I'd probably like to see myself noble enough to go and do something like what the Buddha or Jesus or something did.
Buddhism is older than the Roman Empire.
Relieve the suffering.
Okay.
That's a more important thing to do than power.
But it ties itself up, doesn't it? Because what if you were the advisor to the emperor?
Yeah.
He has responsibilities. Let's say he was a good emperor, not a lunatic.
Yeah. A benevolent dictator.
Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah.
My God. A genuinely conscientious, hardworking.
Yeah, there were some in Chinese history too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Yeah. Ties on. Some of them. What would you do?
That's what I probably do. Recognizing that the suffering's going to go on, it'll never end.
Right. As long as the universes exist, there will be suffering.
That's right.
You would have to stop all the universes from ever existing in order to get rid of all suffering.
That's right. That's really right.
Be the destroyer of worlds.
And this is I told you, I'm becoming more pessimistic and cynical. I really am. Last year, for example, first of all, the government sent us these checks. So I gave away $15,000. Well, I gave $5,000 to PLU, but because I like liberal arts colleges that don't require chapel and don't have fraternities, and I like PLU, but I gave a lot, and I thought what I should really try to do is relieve as much suffering. Right. This year, I'm rethinking that. Okay. If I send the money for these kids in Yemen, it's going to relieve the suffering for a day or two or a week. Right. In the long run, they'll just grow up and have more babies, and there'll be more suffering. You see how that's what I mean by pessimistic.
Right. I don't want to I mean, we could just stop killing them.
Yeah.
Or sanction.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, but so then you say, well, how about giving it to politicians that can make a difference?
Right.
And even that, I'm sure again, but I've cut that way back. About in March, I get this many stack of begging letters every week.
Yeah.
Every week.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm reassessing.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, because even if you, maybe it's because the Dune movie just came out, and so thinking about the future and what would you do if you did know what was coming in the future, and, like, what are your responsibilities? I mean, all those words about the Buddha or Jesus of Nazareth or others, they're very old.
Yeah.
It's
Been
not
around.
like I wrote them.
No, it's true.
So
If
you're not going to listen to the Buddha, you're sure as hell aren't going to listen to
me.
Adam Oswald.
So that's true.
For fuck's sake.
And that is a part of human nature too. That Buddha part.
It is.
Yeah, I mean that ability to empathize and recognize, feel guilt when it's. I mean, yeah. So
when it's there, yeah. So it's funny to. I mean, for me, like the specifics of the specific history that got this particular thread in North America, the history of European settlement, colonialization, that got us here, and industrialization, fossil fuel use. To see it, once you learn it, it's kind of like dissecting an organism, or looking at the various components of a robot. Like, it doesn't exist as a whole. Many of these pieces come together as a whole.
Yeah.
And the fundamental aspects of human nature are not unique to our circumstances.
Yeah.
Those are everywhere.
Yeah.
But if you're a farmer in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, who might be having a fairly similar lifestyle to his ancestors from 15,000 years ago,
yeah,
has the same human nature as me,
yeah,
but no history of colonialism, European settlement, or Christianity, or monotheism, all of that's not there for them. So I can look at some of those components of the current United States, the predicament the colonial world finds itself in, of nowhere else to colonize.
Yeah,
it's a traveling wave. It has to keep going.
Yeah,
and it's run out of things to eat. and so that interface winks out of existence like a candle running out of wax, or oxygen,
Yeah.
And so you look on, I'll read the news, and I look online on like compilations of things like online surveys. Redditors of Reddit. What do you think is a hidden crisis or something real that could happen, threatening our way of life that nobody talks about? And there'll be a long list, and you never see peak oil. You never see peak fossil fuels on those lists. They'll talk about sea level rise. They'll talk about super volcanoes, or like a real pandemic, not a very mild pandemic like coronavirus. Whereas for me, I'm like, it's energy, energy, energy.
Mm-hmm.
Oil. That's everything. And people are like, well, when do you think that'll happen? I'm like, 2005?
Yeah,
this
happening.
Is it. You're experiencing it. But if you inhabit a different narrative, if you don't see those different components, you cannot see peak oil.
Yeah.
I filled up my car this day.
Yeah.
How much was it a gallon?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
That's what it, and there's no, what should I do? Write an essay about it? Yeah. Been there, done that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change the amount of oil in the ground.
Yeah.
And it certainly doesn't change people's ideas about oil in the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, I just got a job at a wastewater plant, and right now supply chains are really fucked up because of coronavirus. And for me, it's a little mini. Everybody's like, well, when it gets back to normal. For me, it's a little prelude to collapse.
Yeah.
Because if the part doesn't arrive, it doesn't arrive.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
And the whole corporate culture of like trying to motivate people and lean on them and get you to work doesn't matter.
Yeah. If you don't have the part.
What do you want me to do, boss? So,
you mentioned Dune. There were two reviews or two articles about Dune in New York Times. Can you find them or?
I've seen the movie now.
No, but two articles. One's about Herbert and how he was influenced. He lived on the Washington coast with an Indian tribe for several years.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and sort of the article relates to the fact that his elders there that they told him, the Westerners could cut all the forests. That's equivalent to what he does in Dune, with this other culture coming in and just totally exploiting.
Yeah.
And the other one's a review of how this Dune got it right.
Yeah.
But I can send them to your phone so you can read them. I thought they were really interesting.
No, I mean,
especially Herbert's this influence. I forget if it was the Quileute or one of the tribes over there. But how they say this really influenced his writing of Dune.
Sure. Yeah. No, he had quite the mind. And it's the fact. I mean, it's when he wrote it and published in 1965. It was like an atomic bomb. It just came out of the blue. For that like ecological science fiction. There wasn't much precedent.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't consider myself an American anymore. So this is not my home country, is it?
Yeah.
And so American culture isn't my culture.
Yeah.
And so observing it from the outside, like it's the institutionalization of human relations is American culture. Everything is about, well, all we have to do is build a better system. That will fix our problems. And it's like, have you ever thought of fixing yourself? It's all about, putting people into a different pattern instead of truth-telling in human relations.
Yeah.
That's what I've noticed about my former fellow Americans.
Yeah. I see myself as a citizen of the planet.
Sure.
I mean, that's really, I
would.
Oliver Goldsmith, Citizen of the World, he wrote. But that's really how I see myself, too.
Yeah. I would see myself, Cascadian, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, he did it. It's automatic by making the world one that had no computers and relied on the technologies in quotes that did exist in the world in his universe are so strange by default. They're not technology the way we think about technology.
Yeah.
Instantly makes that universe incredibly interesting.
Yeah.
Because he is talking about technology.
Yeah.
But he did it by removing it out of his universe and making it something else so that it put a back door into people's minds.
Yeah.
When they read it, they're like, what the fuck are the Tleilaxu axolotl tanks? It's like, what? Like how? What does this mean? Why is this a thing? Well, instead of, because otherwise technology, as in most science fiction, people assume they know what it is. Oh, well, it's a faster computer that lets you navigate or whatever. It fits a narrative. It fits an American narrative about technology. All we have to do is be passive consumers and require businesses to invent things that we want, and the world will be a better place. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what drives me insane. Like, here's the environmental side of it. That's what drives me fucking nuts about these, like, stories that'll show up on New York Times. Like, ooh, a teenager made a type of ship that can scoop up plastic on the ocean. I'm like, God damn it! I'm so sick of this shit, because, no, sorry.
It's not going to work.
And it didn't, and lo and behold, it didn't work. And it's always some wunderkind. It's always some handsome, 17-year-old, extremely proud. And part of me feels like, you guys just ruined his life.
Yeah.
Because he or she clearly was very smart,
Yeah.
but now they've got a messiah complex,
Yeah.
and they think one little tweak. That's what all those TED Talks are about. Oh, just do this one little thing different, and it'll all be better. And
Yeah.
my God, you're fucking silver bullet.
Yeah.
You know, and in the broader context, none of your stupid TED Talks and your environmental little tweaks matter anymore because China has the molten salt reactor.
Yeah.
You can't even implement your own technology that you had in the 1960s, the same year Dune was published, because it doesn't fit the narrative of the little widget.
Yeah. Yeah.
The little one fancy thing that one guy in his basement invented.
Or
there's no Steve Jobs for the environment. You have to do this as a mass movement.
Yeah, and also in the news, like General Motors is going to go all electric.
Yeah.
How the hell are they going to, you're saying this is good news. Well, you don't ask the questions. How are you going to charge the batteries?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, wind and solar.
As if that's going to work.
Yeah. Which it won't. I mean, it's so, and like, that's what I mean. The yardstick of public opinion.
Yeah.
Because the individual, like, well, if you know all this, why don't you do something about it? It's like, well, have you listened to my podcast? And no. Okay. Are you going to look it up? No. Okay.
Yeah.
What are you doing then? Well, I guess I'm virtue signaling.
Yeah.
I'm making it clear that I'm part of a group that's more virtuous than this other group.
Yeah.
That's fine with me.
Yeah.
But that's got nothing
virtue
to do with
signaling.
reality.
That's a good way to put it.
That's a buzz phrase on the left.
Yeah.
Everybody's an environmentalist now, almost.
Yeah.
Like you could say that the Trump presidency was the swan song of anti-environmentalism.
Yeah.
Like a final middle finger that's utterly meaningless.
But like you say, there's a gadget that's going to fix it.
Yeah, that's far more insidious.
Yeah.
I would actually rather have a logger be honestly like, I depend on cutting down trees and you all use timber. So stop telling me I'm a bad person.
Yeah.
Either that or stop using wood.
Or stop driving your car or whatever.
Yep.
No, I mean, that's true.
Don't tell me because I have an accent and my hands are callous because I'm a lumberjack that I'm a bad person because I'm the one who cut down the trees. Fuck you. You're the one who put the demand in place.
Yeah.
So, that's, I would much rather have that than somebody who says, I'm an environmentalist they live in New York City and they say, I'm an environmentalist. I'm like, okay, how?
They carry their own bag to the market.
Yeah, and I'm like, you know what? Let's cut fossil fuel supplies of New York City for a year. See how well you do.
I mean,
you're an environmentalist, right?
Yeah. And even though I do, I carry a tote bag. I don't buy the blueberries when they're coming from Peru and stuff like that.
Sure.
But in the long run, like you say, it just takes a shift in the way we think.
Yeah.
I mean,
and like it'll solve us. That's the thing about peak oil. It's not a negotiation.
And everybody alive now will be dead within 100 years.
Yep. Yeah. It's amazing to me how quickly the baby boomer. It feels like in 5 years the baby boomer grip on America has shattered.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Ish. Like there's just like these few pieces left, and people are kind of looking around, being like, "What the hell was going on for the past 3 decades?"
Of course, they control most of the wealth.
Yeah, but it'll just all go to their hospital bills, and that'll be the end of it.
and their children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating. Like you talked about the optimism of the 90s.
Yeah.
I see it as like the most blown opportunity of all time.
Yeah.
Like you should have taken apart the cores, the pits of your nuclear weapons, most of them, not all, and turned them into clean energy.
Yeah.
You can release all that energy in one burst and destroy a city, or siphon it out very slowly and power a city.
Yeah.
And they sat on their hands.
Yeah.
From 1991 to 2001. It took Osama bin Laden for them to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what did they do? Well, I don't know. We're powerful. Let's go to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool. Like what happens when there's a group of people that thinks that they are at the absolute peak?
Yeah.
Well, history begs to differ. Yeah. And history doesn't knock on the door. Yeah. And history does not ask for permission. It's hilarious.
It's fickle.
It's pretty fickle.
Like you gave me the quote of Muriel or Durant. Civilizations exist by geological consent. You said she added, and it's fickle.
Yeah, subject to revocation without notice.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's an example: fossil fuels.
I've shown you the graph. I'll show you a few other things.
Yeah.
But like, you show that graph to Americans of oil production in the United States, the lower 48,
and how they exaggerate the tail.
Yeah. It goes up for the lower 48, and it peaks in 1970, and then it inexorably goes down, and then you get a little blip that's Alaska, and it pulls up a little more on lower 48, and then it declines inexorably again, and then you get offshore drilling. It's like a car blowing out of you get a few bursts. You get a few bursts at the end, and then there's still this wishful thinking, this imaginary thing, just not even to 2100. Just like, oh my God, can we please maintain our way of life to 2040? No. Nature doesn't give a flying fuck about your way of life, your barbecues and your ball games. It's over. And then fracking, that final, the burst. And that was about 10 years.
Yeah.
And coronavirus happened, and now there's going to be another financial crisis, Wall Street meltdown / financial crisis that'll cut the funding to fracking, and then boom, and you'll have. The average decline rate is like 43% on these people.
Yeah. Speaking of statistics like that, the New York Times today had a graph showing which countries have contributed over history.
Yeah.
25% America, about 14% China, and then Europe is a big section. Yeah. And I remember when we took teachers, just after I retired, we're taking 2 summers taking teachers to China for some sort of grant that Greg Utes got, and I would talk about this problem, And I say, with the increased fossil fuels that the Chinese are using, but what the Chinese would say, and I can't remember who I could quote. Okay, the camel's back is breaking. You've been riding it for a long time. It's our turn to get on. That's exactly the way one of them put it to me, or I read actually, and it's true. I mean,
that's the thing. Here's something I think about China. I think part of the reason they've lasted as long as they have is because at a certain level, at a civilizational level, the unconscious of a civilization, they know, maybe unconsciously, that they pay the price for survival internally. They don't try to externalize it. That's why their civil wars are always so hideous.
Yeah.
Like, 100 million dead.
Yeah.
Their civil wars are horrifying to the extreme.
Yeah.
But that's the price they pay to survive. Whereas some other civilizations externalize it. And they're like, well, we'll solve our internal problems on somebody else's territory. And they're gone.
Yeah.
And they're gone.
Yeah.
The Kushans are no longer there, last time I checked.
Yeah.
Neither are the Parthians or the Romans.
Yeah.
Like, fuck people, Oh, Adam, you're so dramatic. I'm like, you try walking to work. And then we'll see how dramatic you are when you limp back home on bloody feet. Like, it is, when it happens, it will be so too late. But I hope to have a few conversations with some people who made fun of me.
Yeah.
When there's no more fossil fuels available.
Yeah.
Not that they're not in the ground. They're not available, folks. Yeah. It didn't satisfy your metabolic needs. Now the food doesn't get shipped anywhere.
Yeah.
Tell me then who's dramatic. Where'd my town of Thompson Falls go? It was never a town. It was a truck stop.
Yeah.
You had no local economy. Boom. It's just gone, And like, what is America in a 5,000? What is the America or the United States in a 5,000-year pulse of human civilization?
Well, that's where I've had a couple occasions to do this, talking with people. You draw the map of the world 2,000 years ago. Here's China. There's no United States, and then you talk about externalizing.
Yeah.
Then you have these 13 colonies 250 years ago,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and then you've got them in the Eastern Hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere, the Northern and Southern Hemisphere, fighting wars. Here's China. Meanwhile, we've had wars in Vietnam, wars in Korea, over here on the west of China. Those are American troops.
Yeah.
Where has China sent their troops?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's got. I mean, think of the another superb Chinese history book by a Westerner. About the Manchu conquest. Yeah, okay, so it's 1644, and you're ready to cross the Great Wall, and you are going to take Beijing, and you are going to become the ruling imperial family of it. But in the long run, you are being swallowed by them. Manchuria was never a part of China proper.
Yeah.
Now it sure as hell is.
Yeah.
Thank you for Manchuria. A lot of forests up there. Thank you for the resources.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting? They say if you want one of the better, the most crisp dialect of Mandarin is in Harbin, up in Manchuria, or Heilongjiang, whatever the province name is now, because it's new.
Yeah.
Southern China has 7,000 versions of spoken Chinese because the settlement happened 2,000 years ago. It evolved, the phylogeny. But the settlement of Han Chinese up in the north, and so it's a relatively new dialect. And they say if you're a foreigner, go there, and you'll learn a really crisp,
Mandarin.
Yeah, no,
that's
swear
it.
to God.
Yeah.
Because it was never part of China proper. You know what I'm doing? You know what is the? If you go through maps on the Middle East or China or many parts of the world, you can see old abandoned frontier walls. There's one across the Taurus Mountains between the Anatolian Plateau and the Al Jazeera, the plains of Mesopotamia. Well, why is that there? Who built that? Which civilization, right? There's one in the middle of Iraq between northern Iraq and southern Iraq. Well, who built that? And there's the gates of Alexander and the walls of which one is it? Derbent. The walls of Derbent. It's now a Russian city. Where'd that come from? So I've been hypothetically having a map of North America of where the geography will break and where the walls will be. Where, like right now, because internally, the freeways cross everywhere.
Yeah.
But that internal cohesion never lasts forever.
Yeah.
So where will the walls be built as the local state apparatus evolves, and then they start fighting each other? And where do they put walls? Except it won't be walls the way we think about it because there's gunpowder, airplanes, and drones.
Yeah.
It's a worthwhile exercise. Because the Taurus Mountains, that was built between the Byzantine Empire and the Abbasid Caliphate.
Yeah.
And the wall in middle Iraq was built between, which one was that? The third dynasty of Ur and the Amorites. And the walls of Derbent was for horseback steppe nomads coming south. Somebody built that.
Yeah.
It meant something for a long time. Now it's a park. Now it's a scenic spot.
Yeah. Tourist attraction.
Nobody controls this. There's no shadowy organization that says this is the direction human history goes. It is part of us. We do not control it any more than we control our own biology.
Yeah. When you say that, I saw a documentary on the Great Wall of China. There were all sorts of older walls that they connected up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There was all sorts of. Far to the west.
Yep.
That's where most of them were.
Yeah. Across the Ordos.
Yeah.
It's. There's still rammed earth Han Dynasty towers
in
Xinjiang. They did that. It meant something, and so, it's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Go ahead and build your narrative. You think you have narrative, but narrative have you.
Yeah.
I mean, because the narrative itself also evolves.
Yeah.
And that's another extreme danger in terms of if you want to be an actual conscientious person dealing with the world and like trying to alleviate suffering. It's an easy path to just invent a narrative that builds a story that you say, hey, this is a good story. Maybe it helps people. Yeah. Are you sure?
Yeah.
I hate to say this, but look at what the Torah has done.
Yeah.
There's a lot of suffering right now in Palestinian territories because of a book.
Yeah.
Because of a book. It built a narrative in people's minds, and it told them that they had claim to a land that they never inhabited.
Yeah.
And now they're there, and now there's a war.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
So even that, even if you're not going to make a governing apparatus or something, you want to build a story built on peace or whatever, even that is fraught.
Yeah.
Damn. What do you do?
What do you think of feminism's attempt to rewrite all these narratives? I think it's good.
Wow. Yeah, I think the problem with it to an extent is it can almost only exist as not resistance. What's the word? Dissident. It exists as dissent.
Yeah.
And it's so it'd be like would an ideal society be one where you didn't have to have feminism? Like it wouldn't mean anything? That'd be, So the very fact that it has to be written as an act of dissent is itself too much of something.
Yeah.
Because, there's, feminism isn't perfect. But
I can go to the same extremes as male masculinism.
Yeah. Well, and this is veering where I don't want to go, but what I would say to a certain point, like to feminists, it'd be like, do you want to have political power? Because political power sucks.
Yeah.
And it's part of a process that has no control.
Yeah.
So, for every strong king, so in traditional stories, for every strong king, there's a woman who's influencing him.
Yeah.
For every Genghis Khan, there's a Bertha.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was just as important for the Mongol Empire as him.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's an interesting. It's just another part of history. So.
In other words, it's critical of this accepted narrative, but it's still creating its own narrative, which is not.
But the fact that it has to be a dissenting narrative is in itself,
Yeah.
It's, do you make an alternate history where women have all the political power? Don't get me wrong.
No, but it could be in such as, hey, look, this just shows how fucked up we've been about history.
Yeah.
Let's try to get it right.
Right. But eventually, if you zoom out enough, I don't know how.
I don't know how you would either.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I like about it.
Yeah.
It has challenged the standard narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is, and in a sense, challenging it is almost the point in and of itself. After a while, it's the corruption grows it just accretes.
Yeah.
And it just grows like moss. And so very often, a lot of times, what you think golden ages seem to happen out of nowhere sometimes. Poof, what happened? And it because, maybe the power structure that existed was shaken up a generation before.
Yeah.
And that didn't make the headlines. That didn't fit any really accepted narrative.
Yeah.
Because it was maybe simply a status quo that was so almost mundane.
Yeah.
It didn't need to be written about. But it was shaken up, and it split the wealth among old accreted interests, the wealth and the privilege, and it gave it into new people's hands, and then they used it in fascinating new ways, and that was what created a golden age.
Yeah.
Athens is a good example of that.
Yeah.
I would more important than the golden age of Pericles. And all, the reason why you could have the golden age of Pericles and all this other crap is because of the reforms of Cleisthenes,
Yeah.
a generation previous, that had taken power from the oligarchs and given it to the, plebs or not hoi polloi.
Please?
Oh crap! Plebs that's the Latin term.
Yeah, I know that term.
Yeah. Who are the lower classes? Whatever. It doesn't matter. The equivalent of the plebs. But if you look at what Cleisthenes did, he basically had an existing structure and he shook it up.
Yeah.
And it just not randomized it, but broke it up enough so that all the old patterns of patronage and accrued wealth were kind of broken without breaking the society down all the way.
Yeah.
And so he broke it up into new demes, just new voting blocks, and the lower classes, the sailors who rowed the boats, kind of took over.
Yeah.
And then you had a golden age, and it turned out much better.
Yeah.
So, or think of the French Revolution.
Yeah.
France went on to conquer all of Europe.
Yeah.
Right after the revolution. Well, if it was before the revolution and you were an aristocrat, you'd say, well, if there's a revolution, France is doomed. Actually, France is about to enter on a golden age once they get rid of your parasitic vampire-sucking asses.
So what about the communist revolution in China?
That's a good example.
Yeah.
Broke the landlords.
Yeah.
Those local aristocratic landlords had to get out of the way if China was going to industrialize.
Yeah. But meanwhile, I think you have a new parasitic class there, too.
It's rising. It is rising. No, that's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
And that, whatever the internal politics are so opaque of China that nobody from the outside knows what's actually going on.
Yeah.
But the anti-corruption drive, whatever it was, that it's very hard to do actual anti-corruption drives that make a difference.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
If Xi Jinping did anything, it was that. But I think he's losing his edge.
Yeah.
Not that it really matters what I think.
Well, what scares me the most about it is that their ideology is I think they really believe they can control history and nature. I really think that that's fundamental to their...
Yeah.
And that scares the shit out of me.
Well, yeah.
Because if they can't solve the problems, well, nobody can.
They're just going to survive.
Yeah.
You see it. Here's the thing, I think you're correct in that. But they probably, when it happens, they'll once again pay the price internally to survive.
Yeah.
And by the time that really happens, I think the West will be just a shattered, essentially gone.
Yeah.
Because there's not enough fossil fuel.
Yeah.
It'll just disappear in a summer. There's no...
Yeah.
They'll loot the gas stations, and then what? And then what?
Yeah.
When coronavirus happened, people went looting. Both literally in some parts of the United States and figuratively with the toilet paper panic and all that other, ridiculous stuff.
Yeah.
Well, there's things that happen that are called earthquakes.
Yeah.
Coronavirus doesn't break your roads or your electric grid. The lights were on, the police were still there, and people still panicked. And they were panic buying. So imagine what will happen when a real crisis hits. This was a crisis of our own weakness. Only.
Yeah, no.
Other countries were did much better.
And that earthquake will come, and the hurricanes will continue to come, and that big one's going to come.
Yeah.
Whether it's before we collapse or
is almost immaterial because
the
real collapse will be the fossil fuel thing.
Yeah.
And I just have the arguments about wind and solar. We'll have a wind and solar grid that will charge all of our cars and trucks will be turned to electric. Don't know what we'll do with the old ones. And then we'll be fine. Those arguments are beginning to really reek of desperation.
Really reek. Yeah.
What the fuck are you talking about? We can't make that transition fast enough.
No. I agree. Well,
and in terms of practicality, who's more, people are well, ideological. China's all ideological. You're right. Who's more ideological?
Yeah.
I mean, the American commitment to this fantasy image of capitalism, which to my mind is just the status quo with lipstick on
Yeah. No, I
is
I
so
agree.
intense that you can't even talk about real
Yeah.
reform that would make sense.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? You know what you could do to really help the fossil fuel price? Normalize relations with Iran.
Yeah.
Your sanctions aren't working anyway, so cut your losses and run.
Yeah.
You already don't care anything about them.
Yeah.
You already don't care that the Persian people exist. You don't care about them at all.
Yeah.
Because your foreign policy in the Middle East is dictated to you by Saudi Arabia and Israel.
Yeah.
So just normalize it and then pretend that they don't exist.
Yeah.
Sir, what do you think about Iran, Mr. President? Who?
Yeah.
Moving on, next question. And then the oil price would go down, wouldn't
Yeah,
it? And
yeah.
Saudi Arabia could scream and scream and it wouldn't matter. We just say, shut up. What are you going to do? If you want to fight them, do it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And if Israel screamed and screamed, we'd be like, shut up. If you want to fight them, do it. We're not going to do it for you.
Yeah.
And then Israel would shut up and it'd be the end of it.
That
And
would
then the
be-
price of oil and natural gas would go a little bit lower and be stabler.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be great?
Wouldn't that be great?
It would be
but
great.
you could not do it. The United States will disappear before they let go
Yeah.
of Iran.
Yeah.
It's ludicrous. We're dying empires. This is what it's like. As they die, the practicalities fall away, and the vision, the fantasy, is the only thing left to cling to.
Yeah. And then the truth about what we did in Iran when there was a
Yeah.
democratic election. And
Yeah.
that, no.
And it's like, what are you going to do? Send them an apology note? They're done with us. They don't care. There used to be strong pro-Western elements in Persian society.
Yeah.
They're looking at us. There's still a few left.
Yeah.
But they've aged. They're aging out.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And so it's just, I feel like would you go back in time and help the Romans? I don't know. Would you go back in time and help the Qing dynasty survive? What would you tell them?
Yeah.
Because they'd say, well, we have to make sure the Manchu are in charge. Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Really? Because they did.
Yeah.
I never knew how bad that was until I read Autumn in the Heavenly Kingdom.
Yeah.
There was very vicious anti-Han rhetoric and sentiment in the Manchu elites
Yeah.
to the very end.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I assumed it was much more cosmopolitan. That was on the surface.
Yeah.
That was what they projected to the Han. There was one negotiation. It was between the Jianqing Emperor, the last one, talking to the British before the Second Opium War. This is after the first one, so this is like the 1840s or 50s. And the British were threatening them. They're like, if you need to do something, or else we'll send in our armies. And he's like, well, I'd send my armies to you. They're only Chinese. He said that.
Yeah.
That's an actual quote, and he said it to his enemy, a Western enemy, the British. And I think of what Americans, their attitude towards the rest of the whole fucking human race. A lot of them really do hold literally the entirety of the rest of the human race in contempt.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah.
It's real. Not that they know anything about the rest
Yeah.
of the human race.
Yeah.
It's so real. It's so sincere. You'll sit there and be like, well, what do you think about Mexican culture?
Yeah.
What? Mexican culture is incredible.
Yeah.
And which one? It's hundreds of languages
Yeah.
and cultures. They really do. And I'm like, you know what? Let them go. Let American culture go. It's no great loss.
I agree. I'm going to go.
Okay.
The next week, if it's reasonable weather, we'll do mushrooming.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Give me we'll just go look, and I can show you the spots.
Yeah.
But who knows?
Yeah,
but-
I have some now.
But if it's not,
Oh, it's been really rainy. I could grab you some of the shaggy lepiotas.
we can.
Probably, I think so.
Oh, sure. Just one would be enough.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Dinner plate.